I'm Lori Oakley, the Planning Director, and not seated at the table, I would like to introduce Angie Blunt. She's seated at the first row here. She is our new planner that started in January. You will be seeing her at future meetings. She came to us with 13 plus years of planning experience from both Vance County and Granville County, and we're happy to have her on board.
Good.
Terry Walker, Chairman of the Planning Board.
A member of the planning board.
Sims, one of 5 county commissioners.
Commissioners?
Good evening. I'm Charlie Palmer, County Commissioner.
Kyle Preer, Vice Chairman of the Board.
Gordon Powell, Chairman of the Board. And thank you all for being here today. It's a little bit of a new experience, I think, for all of us, but Manager York, would you?
Sure. I
Proceed with
think
this.
Lori is going to lead us in a presentation, and then we have some time for Q&A following that. Do you want to start with your presentation?
I
Lori?
do. I do want to recognize that we also have some planning board members attending virtually. I'm not sure who is participating, but I think we have at least one or two on. Okay, Sheila McGee is a planning board member. She is participating virtually.
Thank you.
So what I'm here to talk to you about today is what we refer to as the Chapter 160D text amendment. My presentation will be somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes. I will try to make it interesting. It is all planning all the time. This is a text amendment. It's rather large. It's coming to us from the North Carolina General Statutes. And we refer to it as the Chapter 160D text amendment because that is the new planning chapter in the North Carolina General Statutes. And it will govern both city and county planning. So this is just a general overview, as I said, and this will go to public hearing at the Planning Board at April the 8th at 7 p.m. in this room. And it will come to the Board of Commissioners on May the 3rd at 7 p.m. also in this room. So as many of you are aware, North Carolina local governments operate under authority that's granted by the individual state statutes. Currently, counties and cities are governed under North Carolina General Statutes, Chapter 153A for counties and Chapter 160A for cities. In July of 2019, the General Assembly adopted the new chapter of 160D for the North Carolina General Statutes, and it consolidates both city and county planning for development regulations into a single unified chapter. The new legislation doesn't make significant policy changes, but rather it just provides clarifying amendments that must be incorporated into local government regulations. All local governments shall adopt these statutes no later than July 1st of 2021. As of that date, the rules and regulations of Chapter 160D will apply whether we have adopted them into our local ordinances or not. About 99% of the amendments that I'm going over with you today are required per North Carolina General Statutes. There are just a couple that are optional. They are toward the ends of my presentation. I'll make it very clear that they are optional amendments. So to start off with, I'm going to just kind of highlight some of the significant changes, and then I'll kind of go chapter through chapter. And so first off, Chapter 160D will eliminate conditional use permits. Conditional use permits previously were reviewed by the Board of Adjustment. Special use permits will remain. Conditional use permits with simultaneous rezonings, they're often referred to as conditional use district rezonings. Those will be eliminated. I don't believe we've had any here in Person County. So the two types of rezonings which will be allowed are general rezonings, which is what the boards have seen previously, and conditional district rezonings, which I'll go over a little bit later. Special use permits will no longer be reviewed by the Planning Board. Once submitted and reviewed by staff, they will go straight to the Board of Commissioners for review. This amendment will clarify when development agreements are allowed. It also states that we cannot regulate manufactured homes based on the age of the home, which most jurisdictions in the state currently do. It requires that an up-to-date comprehensive plan be in place if you have zoning in your jurisdiction, which we do have a comprehensive plan, and we will hopefully have a new plan to you this summer for adoption that we're partnering right now with the city. And lastly, all governing boards, i.e. the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment, will be required to have their own bylaws, and all board members must be sworn in as members of that board. Now, as I said, I'm just going to kind of briefly go chapter by chapter. So we're looking at the planning ordinance, which most people refer to as the zoning ordinance. So Articles 1 through 6, there are no significant changes other than referencing the new general statute. Article 7, we're removing the current planning processes such as special use permits, rezonings, and we're relocating them to Article 14. Articles 8 through 12 have no changes. Article 13, we are reorganizing that existing article. We're also clarifying the zoning permit process and allowing for performance guarantees for non-residential development. So previously, performance guarantees, which are basically bonds or letters of credit, were only allowed for major subdivisions, stormwater projects, and more recently, we required them for solar array systems. Those will not change. An example where we might use it is if a developer might be wanting to post a bond for paving of roads in a subdivision in order so they can go ahead and get the plat recorded so they can start selling lots. So they'll post a bond or a performance guarantee, and then once the roads are paved, that bond is then released. Performance guarantees are now going to be allowed for commercial projects across the state. So for example, if it's raining quite a bit, we do get rainy seasons, and say we have a developer of a dollar type store in the county, and he's met all zoning requirements, all building code requirements, but he can't get out there to pave his parking lot, which is something that we had happen. He will, under the new code, be allowed to post a bond for that paving. He'll be able to get a temporary CO from building inspections, then he can pave, and then his final CO will be released. So we can now require a performance bond for commercial projects. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop and ask.
One quick question. The
Yes.
articles that you mentioned on, that are, like, for instance, you said Article 7, removing to Article 14. Which one of these is showing the articles?
So in the copy that I printed for you, so at the very top of the beginning of each chapter, it'll have the article number.
Okay, so this one right here.
And so it's the big one, yes, the
Yeah.
planning ordinance, yes, sorry. And so, yes, there's also a table of contents at the beginning, which will also kind of list it easier.
Thank you.
So Article 14, this is kind of the meat of the text amendment, and this is where most of the changes are occurring. So you have, first in there, you have the duration of approvals. And this basically tells you how long an approval is good for. For example, a zoning permit is valid for 1 year. Site-specific development plans are typically valid for 2 years, and they could be up to 5 years and so on. Text amendments and rezonings, there's no significant changes to this section, except third-party downzonings are no longer allowed unless they are initiated by a Person County board member or a staff member. So a downzoning is exactly what it sounds like. It's a rezoning from a more intense zoning district, such as a commercial or industrial, down to a lesser intense zoning district, such as residential. The next item is conditional district rezonings. This will be a new process for Person County. I'm very familiar with the process. I've worked with it, and I think the boards will quickly grab a hold of it. It's basically a general rezoning with a site plan. And they'll also provide a list of proposed uses to go on that site plan. Or alternately, they can also list uses they do not want for the site. This is very common, for example, if you had a strip center type of commercial building. So they will submit a site plan, they'll show you the building, they'll show you the parking, and then they'll show you a list of possible proposed uses that would go in the strip center, not knowing all of the uses at that time. Or alternatively, they may say, we want all uses allowed except X, Y, Z, and so forth. So again, it's kind of like you've combined the special use permit and a general rezoning together in one process. The only difference is conditional rezonings are legislative, meaning that there's no sworn testimony, there's no four findings of facts. It is a legislative process. Conditional district rezonings, again, it's one process, and it will be reviewed by both the planning board and the board of commissioners. Special use permits, they're not changing except that they will no longer be reviewed by the planning board. It was brought to my attention at a conference recently that as the state statutes are currently written, the Board of Commissioners are not supposed to consider a planning board's recommendation for a special use permit. Strangely, I found out that about half of the jurisdictions in the state currently have special use permits written into their ordinance that go directly to the Board of Commissioners, while the other half of us had it written where it went to the planning board and then to the Board of Commissioners. So they've asked us to clean that up. Because special use permits are quasi-judicial, they shall only be reviewed at a public hearing with sworn testimony by the Board of Commissioners. So again, when they come into our office, unfortunately, they will not come to you guys. We will be presenting them straight to the Board of Commissioners. Development agreements and vested rights, both of them are very similar. We currently have vested rights listed in our ordinance, but now we will also have to add development agreements. The normal approval period for a board-approved project, for example, a special use permit, is 2 years. They can apply for vested rights with that approval, and it extends the approval. They can request anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And that's a total, so they could request an extra 1, 2, or 3 years for a total of 5 years. Now, if you have a minimum of 25 acres, you can alternatively apply for a development agreement and obtain approvals for up to a total of 7 years on the project. So basically kind of like vested rights for 7 years. You typically see them on larger projects, hence the minimum acreage size of 25 acres per the state. Both of them are essentially documents that outline the required agreements that they agree to as part of the conditions placed on the plan. They can include both on-site and off-site requirements, such as sometimes you'll see open space dedicated for maybe a public park on site, or it could be off-site improvements that they're required to do a turn lane at a nearby intersection. Those would be included in there. Vested rights, variances, and appeals will stay the same. Articles 15 and 16, we're basically relocating some of the penalties and violations to a different section in the ordinance. Appendix A, there will be no changes. Appendix B is definitions, and we have new definitions that were added verbatim from North Carolina General Statutes, and some existing definitions which were amended to also reflect the required changes by the general statutes. So this next part is where I talked about optional. As stated, the majority of these changes, everything I've went over so far, is required by North Carolina General Statutes. There's a couple of things I'm going to go over now in yellow, which we still have to make some changes, but you can decide which route you want to go. Most of the uses in Appendix C in the table of uses, all of the uses currently, they either have an X, which means they're permitted by right. They have an S, which means they require a special use permit, a C that requires a conditional use permit, or it's left blank, which means it's prohibited. So the majority of the Cs are now changing to an S because, as we stated, conditional use permits will no longer be allowed. So they're changing over to special use permits. However, when staff was reviewing these, we noticed quite a few uses that we felt were appropriate by right, particularly in commercial districts. And so we are proposing, I think there's 10 of them, that they actually be by right. But if the board so chooses, they can say, no, we'd rather them be special use permit, or you can kind of pick and choose out of this list. And that would be animal medical care in the B2, which is a commercial district. The following we're proposing by right. A blacksmith in the B1 highway commercial district. Churches in R, B1, B2, and GI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that one, and I forgot to put my closed parentheses on that. That's the RLUIPA. So Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000. It basically states that you cannot impose a substantial burden on a religious use. We've had several churches that wanted to do additions onto their church, but because they were located in our zoning district, they either opted not to do it or they had to somehow come up with a $250 review fee to go before the Board of Adjustment. We've never seen a church addition turned down in the years that I've been here or previous years. So staff felt that churches should be allowed in all districts, not just in the RC. And so that's why on that particular one, we're actually including a residential district in addition to commercial. Daycare centers in B1, B2, and GI, which GI is a general industrial. Exterminating service in B2. Kennel operations in B1. Landscape contractor in B2. Nursing home in B1. Public recreation in B1 and B2, and rest home in B1. Again, staff's proposing that all these changes really involve uses that would be allowed by right in commercial districts, except for churches, which we feel should be allowed in residential districts. And like I said, if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to go over them. Or if you like part of them and not others, please, you've got time before the public hearing to kind of go through that list. Because as I said, we'll either have to change it to an S for special use permit or an X by right. So on the next screen is I think it's our last slide. We're getting near the last slide for the planning ordinance. And this also has a couple of optional requirements. And again, they are in yellow on the screen. So this is the notes section, which it falls behind the table of uses in the zoning ordinance. And so notes 1 and 2, we basically just corrected a couple of typos. In note 3, we removed Class C manufactured homes. Again, the North Carolina General Statute states that we can no longer regulate manufactured homes based on age. So all manufactured homes will either be a Class A or Class B, which is a single wide or a double wide. Currently, we have a Class C, which is a mobile home that predates, I believe it's 1976, 74, 76. So now we can't distinguish based on the year. That is a requirement. Note 4 is one of the optional ones. So manufactured home hardship to be approved by zoning administrator. So we currently allow multiple manufactured homes and single-family dwellings per parcel at staff level. So if you came in to obtain a permit for a house, and then a year or two down the road, you want to put another house for your aging parent out back, you can currently do that as long as you can get through environmental health and handle out the well and septic and make sure you meet setbacks. So this would be no different than someone coming in the office and basically seeking a permit for a second dwelling. The only difference that currently exists between a permanent manufactured home and a temporary is that temporary manufactured homes could utilize vinyl underpinning, because right now all permanent homes do have to have masonry underpinning. Notes 5 and 6, we're not proposing any changes. Note 7 is going to be similar to note 6, or excuse me, to note 4. Again, note 7 says that allows the zoning administrator to approve temporary manufactured homes during the construction of a permanent dwelling. Again, you could come in right now and we could actually permit your manufactured home and your dwelling at the same time. But this would basically clarify what we're currently allowed to do, that you could come in and permit a temporary one while you have the permanent one and is under construction. Note 8 allows the zoning administrator to approve temporary campers and RVs in the case of a natural disaster. I will be honest with you, I am currently doing that. there are two paragraphs in our ordinance right now that conflict with one another. And one of the paragraphs says that, and again, this is only in the case of a fire or a flood or a natural disaster. One paragraph says you have to wait 45 days to go to the Board of Adjustment to get approval to put a temporary dwelling. And the other paragraph says the zoning administrator can issue you a zoning permit. Well, I'm going to issue you a zoning permit if you just lost your house in a flood or a fire. I've only had to do that twice in the 4 years that I've been here. And again, we've got two paragraphs that contradict each other. So we just kind of want to clean that up to say that the zoning administrator can issue a zoning permit for that temporary RV or camper. It's for 1 year period while you're reconstructing your home in the case of a natural disaster.
Is there a time limit on the temporary status of the structures? Like 12 months, 18, I mean, is there?
It is, it's a 12 months.
Okay.
And then there's even a process of if it has to be extended for a period of outlines, parameters of what you'd have to do to prove that, say you've been working on it and you're nearing final completion. So then it says, for example, you could administer an extra 3 months depending on where they're at in the process. Again, for the optional ones, they are in yellow on the screen. It's for notes 4, 7, and 8. If you decide that you want to keep them as they're currently written, then we would just need to change conditional use permit in each of those instances to a special use permit. That is it for the changes to the zoning ordinance or planning ordinance. Our subdivision ordinance or subdivision regulations are also impacted. And really, it's only section 33 in the subdivision regulations. And it's only clarifying the process for bonding requirements. There are no major policy changes. It just talks about who you need to submit the bond to, what amount, nothing is changing, and kind of outlines the steps and procedure for that. So those are all of the changes that I have. As I stated, most of them are required by general statute, except for those few changes at the very end, where we're proposing to change some of those uses to by right. And then a few of those notes regarding temporary and hardship manufactured homes and campers that could be used during natural disasters. If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. If you think of specific questions before the public hearing, you can contact me via email or phone, or we can discuss it at the public hearing. But I just kind of wanted to get these in front of you in advance. You will also have quite a few number of other cases that come before you the same night this does. So that's why I figured since it's so large, if I can go ahead and bring it to you and kind of give you a general overview and also show you what's required versus kind of what's optional, that we can go ahead and get ahead of the game there.
Questions, anyone?
I do have a question. There's an ordinance now at the lakes or Hyco. I think it's 2 weeks time frame. You can have a camper on site and it has to be pulled off.
Yes.
Could this maybe it be incorporated into, just say, I've got a lake lot that I take my camper to? Well, my home just burnt to the ground. Could I take my camper to the lake? I mean, has anybody thought about this?
So I know exactly what you're referring to. It's currently in the accessory section of our ordinance in Article 6, Section 60. We are not proposing any changes to that section, but in there's 2 different paragraphs that talk about campers and RVs that can be brought on a property for 2 weeks, and then they have to be taken off the property for 4 weeks. That was added to the ordinance back in 2010.
Right.
That predates me. I've been told that there were some issues at Hyco Lake with people essentially living in the campers. And so that is why that text was adopted into the ordinance. So the only text that we're proposing to address with campers is in the case of a natural disaster. So if your property is flooded or if there's a tornado or it catches on fire, that would be the only instance where you can bring on that RV and basically live in it while you're reconstructing the new house.
Perfect. Thank you.
Kind like a certificate of need, you have to prove a need
Yes.
for it.
So just to recap some of my takeaways from it. All special use permits, y'all will no longer hear, we will hear, correct?
They will go straight to the board.
Straight
of
to
Commissioners.
us. All right. And this is consolidating current city and county statutes into a single unified chapter. So this is going to be the same for the county, for the city, across the board.
So yes, and I was asked that question before the board meeting. So the city has a UDO, a Unified Development Ordinance, and we have we have several ordinances. But we have a planning ordinance, which is referred to as a zoning ordinance, and we have a subdivision ordinance. So while some of it may read a little bit different because they were written at different times by different consultants, they will basically contain, for example, the chapter on special use permits will read identical in both jurisdictions. You know, the chapter on conditional district rezonings will read the same in the city and the county. Now, the uses might be different because obviously the city may treat uses differently than you would in the county. But so far as the planning processes, they will read exactly the same because we're taking them from North Carolina General Statute.
And conditional use permits will still be, hearings will still be held by you.
No, conditional use permits will be going away. So the Board of Adjustment will now be rarely meeting. They will only review variances and appeals.
Okay. And you're no longer able to give recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on any, as you've done in the past.
So we currently do not give recommendations on special use permits because they are quasi judicial and they're based on sworn testimony, and you're supposed to gather the evidence at the hearing and then go from there and make the decision. But yes, we will continue to make recommendations on rezonings, text amendments, conditional rezonings. There will be staff recommendation.
And in yellow, these 10 categories as of businesses, we have the option, they were changed to C, they were C conditional uses, but they were changed to X by right, those 10 business industries that you listed, correct?
So that is what staff is proposing. So in your draft copy, there's a lot more uses. So anytime we saw a C, we basically changed it to an S because we're like, okay, it previously required a public hearing. We feel that it should continue to require a public hearing, but there were these few 10 out of 100 plus uses that jumped out at us that we felt maybe they don't need the public hearing process. Maybe they should be handled at staff level. And so those were the 10 that we specifically called out in this PowerPoint that we're proposing that it go to by right, which means we would do plan review and issue permits all at staff level.
And no public hearing.
No public hearing.
Okay.
And you could look at this use and say, nope, we want them all to go public hearing. Or you can say, we think they should all go except maybe churches. So you can kind of pick and choose of that list. And again, even the entire list. So as I said, there's other ones in there that we automatically took them from a C to an S. You may look at some and go, you know, I feel like that could be allowed at staff level too. So please feel free to look through your entire table of uses that's in the draft I printed.
Finding of facts still, the finding of facts, the 4 findings of facts still
Would still apply for a
still apply
special,
for the
for a
when the
special use
commissioners have
permit.
to, okay.
So would you come in again on the owner rights?
On what?
The owner rights, I guess that's the right term, in the zoning, certain, the owner may have rights to build on a certain property if zoned in a particular, well, a Dollar General, I don't know what else to say, that type thing.
Are you talking about performance guarantees or?
No, just
Vested rights? and-
vested rights to build on their property without a public hearing.
No, so a vested right or development agreement, both of those processes require a public hearing. And what they'll normally do is piggyback with, say, for example, a special use permit or a conditional district rezoning. Or say that by some chance we get something that's allowed by right. And then let's use a Dollar General because we just got another set in for review. So that is allowed at staff level in an RC district. So when we approve it at staff level, it's based, the plans are good for 2 years. Now, if they say, we don't know that we're going to get this done in 2 years, we need to apply for vested rights, they could file an application for vested rights, which goes to planning board and board of commissioners to get up to 5 years if they needed to extend that. I haven't seen smaller projects do that, but it does happen. Usually it happens when you have a much larger project that already requires a public hearing. And since they're already going to the board, they're like, well, I might as well ask for an extension of my 2 years and try to get a little bit longer period in there, just in case.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, it does. We have a lot of comments about that one. Yeah,
As I stated, the only really new process I think that'll be coming before y'all that I think you will enjoy is that conditional district rezoning. Where I worked previously, we were kind of on the forefront and we adopted it back in 2010 when it was still fairly new. And board members seem to really like it. For example, you have a rezoning that will be coming to you in a few months. And when you rezone from one general district to another district, they can basically do anything that's allowed in that new district. Whereas when they submit a conditional rezoning, and we've actually already been talking to some developers about this process, they're going to give you a specific site plan. And so a lot of times it gives you an added level of comfort because you know then what they're specifically wanting to do on the site. So I do think you will enjoy that process, hopefully, once it's adopted. And like I said, we've already had some inquiries about it. So might be getting one this summer. We'll see.
Okay. Okay, now is this board going to comment?
Is the planning board going to comment?
Yeah. would
I
like
don't
to.
think so. I think this is just intended as an informational
Okay.
session between both boards.
It is. I mean, if the planning board has any comments, by all means, please feel free to voice them. We will be having a public hearing on those dates I gave at the beginning in April for the planning board and May for the Board of Commissioners. So there will be public comment at both of those public hearings. There'll be opportunity for the public to engage and comment. Like I did say, though, the majority of this is required. It's just those few things at the end that are really optional to decide how do you want to approach them.
Okay.
So on page 141, this is where we're for the tables of uses on Appendix C. So where there's a C struck through and it's an S, that is required, correct? Well, under the new guideline, it'd be go from conditional to special use. So that would be required.
So yes, I'm on page 141 and there's a couple of them. For example, ambulance service was a C and it was marked out as and changed to an S.
Okay.
So that we just changed because the C, the conditional use process, is going away, so we converted it over to special use.
Okay, but that's required. That's not optional.
Well, I mean, you could change it. For example, you could, just like those couple that we drew out, you could say, you know what? I think antique shops should not go from a C to an S in the R district, but rather I think it should be permitted.
Okay.
So you can, as a board, say, well, we agree with most of this, but we would like this use to be allowed, this use to be special. I mean, you could really change any of these.
Okay.
The main focus is we're trying to get rid of all those Cs because they do have to go away, the
Okay.
conditional use. That's why I said this is a lot, and that's why I kind of wanted to give it to you a little ahead of time.
How much caffeine is required? You guys have done amazing.
I think that's pretty much it.
Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
what I would recommend from this board is for the five of us to just look through this, and if there's any changes that is other than suggested from the planning board to, get their understanding and, see if they think that's a reasonable change before we go and just say we want to change it. I respect the planning board's decision and decision-making process by all means. So if there's something that we recommend, I want to make sure that there's plenty of time before we get to this public hearing to y'all to provide input and why you would probably not want to change it on that.
Going to be probably putting a little more work on your part in that we won't have as much work to do because of special use. And I'm glad for you on that.
Yeah.
Well,
the applicant will appreciate the more streamlined or expedited process that we're able to offer, because that can get
Yeah,
lengthy.
it does delay it. You're right, exactly. But it make your meeting a little bit longer.
You sure we want to do that?
So when is the next planning board meeting?
So I was going to say, the planning board meets April the 8th. We normally get their packets out at least a week in advance. I think we were actually shooting to get them out around the 29th of March. So in 2 weeks, we were hoping to get their packets out. So if there's any way you could have comments to me by the 29th, if not, you could get them up to me the 8th. I know the chairman would rather have them in his packet, and so would the board members. But again, if that's not possible, if we could have them at least before their meeting on the 8th.
Is there any way to make the meeting accessible via Zoom rather than in person? Is it possible?
For the planning board, I can talk to IT. That would require an IT staff member available at our planning board meetings.
You're it.
There he is.
There he is. Just, it might streamline some stuff for board, because the board of commissioners has a lot of boards to work on and a lot of stuff. And so that would just kind of maybe ease up some of the burden of having to physically be somewhere for a meeting. And it would maybe, we could engage more often with the process.
So would you like all planning board meetings streamed or just that next one?
I would prefer all of them, but for sure the next one, yeah. I don't know what the board's pleasure is.
I haven't
think
been to
we're gonna
one, so
have
I'd
to
like to see how
look
it
at
goes
our
first before I
IT
say I want to go to all of
needs
them.
and
I'm sorry, what?
We probably need to look at some solutions to being able to Zoom without the presence of IT staff, because we don't quite have enough resources to Zoom
Okay.
all of our committee meetings as well as commissioner meetings. So.
And even
I'll
if it's,
talk
if
with
even it's just
Prince.
by audio, that it should be, so we can listen in at least. It
Sure.
would be convenient.
Yeah, we'll talk about some solutions.
Okay.
Okay. Chairman Walker and board members, we do appreciate what you do for us. You have in the past historically made our jobs easier.
I'm sorry?
You have in the past made our jobs easier,
Oh, yeah, thank you.
and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with you on the changes that are coming up that are required. But again, we appreciate you and your board and time you put on it. It's quite involved, and I understand that and know that. Generally, the public doesn't, except those that are making requests. But again, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any
Thank you for that.
comments further for?
I appreciate what you're doing, and also it's good, it's first time put a name with a face now, so I know who's on the planning board, so it's good to see you guys.
Thank you very much for serving the county.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you all. I know Mr. Brown from church. Good to see you, buddy. But thank you all for y'all's hard work. You guys do also.
Just want to echo, thank you for what you do. Appreciate all your hard work.
Well, I have to commend you all for all of your hard work. And Lori and her staff, they put a lot of hours and they make our job a lot easier. And so we're just figureheads out there a lot of times. And Lori does a great job, and her staff as well. And so thank you for providing a competent staff.
Thank you.
We think
Ditto.
she's wonderful.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, is that all? Everybody happy?
That's all that I have for 160D. While I have everyone's attention, I just want to say that we are still engaged with the city in the update to the comprehensive plan. We hope to have a draft ready this spring around April or May. So that will be coming to both the planning board and the board of commissioners this summer. I think last I saw was we're shooting for July and August. So be on the lookout for that. That's exciting. We'll have a brand new comprehensive plan to guide our county into the next 20 years of growth and development. So that'll also be on the forefront. That is all I have today. I'd like to thank everyone for being in attendance and asking great questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank everyone. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
No discussion? Good. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carried.